Hello everyone. Good afternoon. Can you guys hear me? Guys, am I audible? Can you hear me? Okay. And hopefully you can see my screen as well then. All right. So welcome to today's session. Today we are going to talk about cloud services, right? And especially AWS, right? So let's start with understanding what is cloud. Okay. And to understand cloud, you need to understand infrastructure, right? So whenever you perform any computing operation like compiling or deploying your application or saving binary on a storage device, all this requires compute power. All this requires servers and networks, storage, and everything around it, right? So there are a couple of ways using which you can have this infrastructure, this compute power. First is on premise. That means you set up, you find a place, you set up all your compute requirement in that place. You manage all the servers, all the network equipment, all the storage devices, everything you manage by yourself, right? Self managed infrastructure or on premise infrastructure. Think of it as a data center. You own the servers, you own the applications running on the servers, you own the underlying networking, you own everything. If something is not available on the infrastructure, it is your responsibility, right? That's called on premise. Second option is maybe you don't want to own the infrastructure, right? If you want to, let's say, do some compilation, you can ask someone that, hey, can I have a virtual machine for maybe 10 minutes where I can run my compilation? And somebody can say, hey, yeah, you can have a virtual machine. Here is the URL or here is the IP address and your login and password. Just log into the machine. Once you are done with your work, just delete the machine, right? So on request or on demand. Okay, unfortunately, this application stops working, but yeah, on demand infrastructure, right? Or also known as cloud compute, right? Where the hardware, the servers, the storage device, the network device, all that is owned by someone else. Someone else owns this infrastructure, generally the cloud companies, the cloud organizations like AWS. And you, as a user, you access these services over the internet, right? Over the internet. And maybe you request for a server, you request for a storage, you request for some network capabilities, isolated network, and those you get and use. And once you are done with using them, you destroy them, right? Everything is virtual. You don't get to touch and feel any hardware device, any infrastructure, because it's all owned and kept at some other place where you don't need to know and need to connect. Also, you can just connect via internet and use those services, right? So these are called cloud services. Now people are now moving towards cloud because of various reasons. Owning a data center can be very expensive unless you are doing it at a scale. If you are just running one application, if you're a small development team, let's say 4 people, and you are working on one application, one product. So you have maybe 2 or 3 Git repositories, you have 2 or 3 servers which you want to use to deploy the application, and you have 4 or 5 build machines, and then networking all around it. Somebody has to manage all that. So if you have a small team, then you don't want to manage an entire data center or set up your own servers and manage that, because you need to have that expertise and you need to have the bandwidth to do all that, and that's an added expense. So for smaller team or for medium sized teams, cloud services become cheaper because you don't have to manage them, you can just pay and use the services, right? But if you are a very large team, maybe 1 2 3 thousand employees, and they're all developing a lot of applications, then owning your own data center may come out to be cheaper, but still you need the expertise to manage the data center, right? So in normal use case, the data centers are expensive. Yeah, on-premise data centers are expensive. Your internet-based applications or your cloud applications are much cheaper. And then you have also the availability, right? The cloud companies, they make their services available with high availability guarantee, right? So they have a lot of redundancies in place, they have a lot of backups in place, so that you don't lose your resources if something goes down. On the data center, it is up to you how much redundancy you implement, how much offsite backup you implement. So it all depends on how much you want to spend on managing this infrastructure, right? So availability is getting availability is expensive here, but availability is all the way here. Okay. You can also have managed services on cloud or software as services, which is very difficult to get on the cell phone data centers. Okay. So now when we talk about cloud services, what kind of services do we have in cloud? So for example, we have infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. If you want, can you guys hear me? I'm getting a couple of messages that you are not able to hear me. How about others? Okay, people are able to hear me, then it's fine. Okay, so if let's say you want to have access to servers where you want to log in and perform certain tasks, you need access to the actual servers. So you will go with infrastructure as a service, where you will use infrastructure that is provided by the cloud. So managing your storage, right? Managing your network capabilities, managing your own compute servers, operating systems, that comes as infrastructure as service, right? If you have a requirement that you just want to deploy your application, you have developed a Java based application and you want to run it somewhere, you want to run it on a Tomcat server, right? So you don't need to have a server, you don't need to find out any storage. You'd say, hey, I just want an environment or a platform where I can deploy my application. Such services are also provided by cloud, and they are called as platform as a service. For example, AWS Beanstalk, right? App Engine, I think it is Google Cloud or Azure, I don't know, but yeah, App Engine and things like that. Kubernetes, managed Kubernetes is also platform as a service, right? Sometimes you want to use the applications or the services provided by cloud without actually dealing with anything. For example, you want to store your files without worrying about where they are stored, how to access them. You just go to a web interface and use it. So that means you just want to use a software as a service like Google Drive. right? And Adobe Suite, Adobe, right? Or GitHub. These are examples of software as a service where you directly access the application and interact with it. Platform as a service is when you get platform to deploy your applications or to work with your applications from the cloud. And infrastructure as a service is the cloud services where you want to deal with the raw infrastructure, right? So let's talk about AWS now. AWS provides all these services. Let's get back here. AWS provides all these services, right? You can have EC2 instances or EBS storage, EFS storage, which allow you to access raw compute power. You can also have Beanstalk or EKS for having Kubernetes engine without worrying about the underlying infrastructure, right? Software as a service is, Google Drive and all that. You can also have, for example, S3, where you can upload your files and download your files. You can host your own applications. Yeah. Okay. So now let's take a look at a couple of services which AWS provides, right? So first thing first, how do you access those services? Cloud services are paid. You have to pay for those services. So AWS actually makes it easier for you to try out their services for 1 year without paying. Okay, up to certain limits. So if you go to aws.com, that's where you will access the Amazon Web Services. And this is the home page here, right? If you go to aws.amazon.com/free, you can see what you can get for free. Yeah. And you can see here that you can get some things for free for certain amount of time, some things for free for certain uh, amount of resource. For example, you can have 5 GB of free storage on Amazon S3 or 750 hours of compute power on EC2, right? This is available free for 12 months. So 12 months free for your 5 GB of storage, 12 months free with per month 750 hours of compute or virtual machines, right? 12 months free for 750 hours of database per month, right? You always have always free services also. So for example, you can have a DynamoDB, which is a unstructured database, 25 GB worth of DynamoDB for free always, right? 1 million AWS Lambda interactions, lot of things, right? Now, to use these services, you have to create an account. So you can click on sign into console. Well, I am already signed in. So I will go to my console home here, but you can create an account. You have to provide your credit card details, and then you are ready to use the services. Okay, if you follow the guidance on the free tier, read about it, and just use those services, then you don't have to pay anything. But if you exceed your usage, then your credit card will be charged. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at some of their services, right? First is EC2. EC2 stands for Elastic Compute Cloud. So ECC, Elastic Compute Cloud, and they call it as EC2, right? And EC2, if I go here, yeah, EC2 is a service which allows you to get access or to set up your own mini data center, right? You can create your network, you can create your subnets, your internet rules, your subnet rules, your firewall rules, and your servers. Okay, so in EC2, you have something called as instances, right? Instance is nothing but your servers. So for example, you can see I have a server running, and this is a server where I was running Jenkins yesterday, right? We can create a new server just by following couple of steps. So I can click on launch instance, for example, if I want to create a server, and I can choose an operating system. These operating system images are optimized for AWS, and they are called as AMIs, so Amazon Machine Image. There is Ubuntu based AMI, there is RHEL based EMIs, there is Amazon's own Linux EMI as well. There is Mac OS and many other things. There are some EMIs which are freely available for 1 year, so it is available for free tier. There are some EMIs for which you have to pay some license. For example, if you use MySQL Windows Server with SQL Server, then you have to bring your own license or pay for the license to AWS, right? But if you have Microsoft Windows Server, then it is free for you, right? So let's say I want to set up a Ubuntu server. So I clicked on launch instance and I want to set up this one. It is free tier eligible, and I am pretty well versed with Ubuntu, so I'll just use this. I say select, right? I can choose architecture, what kind of architecture I want to use. I say Intel based x86 architecture, so select it. And then it asks me what kind of server I want, how many resources, what kind of resources I want here. Okay, so you see there are some pre-configured resource types according to the resourcing power that they offer. For example, there is a family of T2 servers. T2 servers are very general purpose machines where you get low to moderate performance. Okay, so for example, there is a something called as T2 Nano. If you choose this type of instance, you will get one CPU and half GB of memory. Okay, and the network is low to moderate, so network throughput will not be that fast. There is T2 micro, which offers you one CPU and 1 GB of memory, right? Rest all things remain same, and this is the configuration which you can use for free. So 750 hours of CPU of resources per month you can use for free for first 12 years. Okay. Then if you, but here you will get one CPU and 1 GB of memory. What if you want to have a more powerful machine, right? So in TTU in in T2 you have 2XL, 2 extra large, which will give you 8 CPUs and 32 GB of memory, right? Rest all things remain same. Now, if this is not enough, you want higher network bandwidth, then you can go for T3 type, right? In T3, you have the highest is 8 GB, 8 core and 32 GB with up to 5 gigabit of network, right? You have other resources also. For example, you have C5 extra large, which has 16 gigs, 16 cores and 32 gigs of memory with up to 10 gigabit, right? And then you can go as high as you want. For example, here is C5 and metal, which has 70 core CPUs and 192 GB of RAM with 100 GB of network, right? But again, you have to pay these servers cost. So depending on how much you want to pay and how much resources you want to have, you have to pay for these, right? And there is a hourly rate for these servers. They are charged every minute, but you will be shown the hourly rate here, but you are charged per minute. Okay, so now I choose to be in the free tier. I'll say I want T2 micro based server. Okay, and I say let's give some more details. Okay, now how many instances I want? The default is one, but I can say I want 10 instances, and then I can give some network information also. So which network I want to connect to, which subnet I want to connect to, and what kind of host name I want, and things like that. Okay, I'm not going to go into much details here, but yeah, you can do that. And then I say, well, let's see storage. So by default, 8 GB of disk will be allocated for the server. If you want, you can change it to say 15 GB or something like that. Please note, up to 30 GB per month is free. If you use more than that, then you have to pay for it. 8 GB is minimum. So you can choose it like that. You can add more disk drives in your system by clicking on add new volumes. So that is up to you. Then I say add tags. Tags are nothing but labels. I'm going to skip that. Then security group. This is important. Security group is a way to define what kind of communication can enter into this instance and can go out of this instance. Okay. Okay, guys, if your screen is too small, text is too small, or your screen is blurry, please check from your end. My network is perfectly fine. Okay, please maximize your um, your browser window or wherever you are watching this. From my end, it's perfectly fine. I have done this multiple times. Okay, all right. So here you can define what kind of communication you want to be possible with this server, right? So by default, only SSH is enabled. So it says SSH communication is enabled. That means TCP communication on port 22 is allowed, okay, from and to any IP address. So 0000. You can also say that I want to allow all HTTP communication. So you can choose HTTP here. That means on port 80 from anywhere communication is allowed, right? You can also choose to say that I want to allow all the traffic. That means on all ports, all protocols, allow communication. Okay, it is up to you what you want to allow, right? You can define your own rules. You can also create a set of these rules and apply them whenever you create an instance. So the set of rules is called a security group, right? So you can say select an existing security group. I already have a security group which has some rules defined. So I can choose that and I can say, well, here you go. Choose this security group. And this security group does nothing but allow all traffic to my instance. Okay. So you can have some preset security group or you can create a new one for each instance. Click on review and launch. And now you can review your configurations. So I am using Ubuntu based EMI, T2 micro instance. This is a security group and storage is going to be 8 GB. Other things, well, yeah, nothing here. And no tags also applied. I'm satisfied with this. I click on launch. And then now, since it is a remote server, you want to connect to it via SSH, right? So you need to provide SSH key pair to this server so that the private key or the public key will be stored on the server and you can use your private key to connect to the server. Okay, now I already have a key, so that's why the option is choose an existing key pair. I have this key here which I will use, but if you do not have a key, you can say create a new key pair. Okay, so I say choose an existing key pair and I acknowledge and click on launch instance. And with this, my new virtual machine will be created. I can go back to the instances page here and you can see there was an instance already which is stopped and a new one is in the pending state. I can refresh the state manually. This also changes automatically, so nothing to worry about there. Okay, so now you see it is running. And when a system starts, when a server starts, it will show you a public IP address. Okay, you can click on this instance and you can see more details about this instance or this server. There is a private IP address and there is a public IP address. Where this is private and this is the public IP address. Also a public DNS name and a private DNS name. Okay. Now the private IP address is reachable from within this subnet only. So from one server to another server, you can reach by using this private IP address. But if you want to access this machine from over the internet from outside of AWS, you have to use a public IP address. Okay. So now we are going to connect to this machine and see what is available for us. So there are two ways you can connect to this machine. One is via SSH as using our private key. So let's take a look at that. You can open SSH client on Windows 10 and above. Your PowerShell also has an SSH client, so you can use that on PowerShell, or you can install an external SSH client like Putty, or many other SSH clients are there um, to connect to the machine. Okay, now I'll say SSH and I will give the private key that I want to use. My private key exists in this. This is my private key which I want to use because the corresponding public key is already added to the server when I initiated it. So SSH use my identity, which is this private key, and then connect as user Ubuntu to the machine. Well, which machine? This is the public IP address. So I want to connect here. And it will ask me for confirmation. Yes. Now you see I am connected. And it gives me some information. So 20% memory is used. System load is 0.03. That is the amount of CPU that is being used. There are 0 users logged in. And yeah, things like that. So now I have connected to the instance. I have root permissions, so I can run sudo commands as well. You can see I can run root commands. Okay. If you do not have the SSH key, if you are on a machine where you did not download the SSH key but you want to connect to the server, you can connect to it via web UI as well. So you can click on this connect button and it is going to take you to the web connection. So you can click on this connect and here you get a web terminal. Okay, you can see here, right? Now this terminal has its own limitations. You cannot copy paste text so easily. Working with the terminal is also a bit buggy here. Also it times out after a certain amount of inactivity, so always suggested to use an SSH client. But if that is not possible, for a quick connect and performing some operations, you can connect via web client also. If you lose your SSH keys, then you are out of luck. You have to re-download the SSH key. Okay, or connect via web and upload a public key here and then use that key. Okay, now this is our server, right? On this server you can do anything that you want. For example, let's connect back here. I can install any applications. I can install Git. I can install Tomcat, whatever I want to do. Okay, so this is EC2 instance, a server for you. Now again, if you are done using the instance, it's always suggested that you at least stop the instance. Every minute that you keep your server running is charged. Okay, if you stop the instance, it will not be charged. So if I stop this instance, I will not be paying for this EC2 instance, but the storage associated with this instance will still be counted against my free usage because the storage is allocated here. All right. So if you do not want the storage to be charged against your quota, then it is always suggested to terminate the instance. If you terminate the instance, your data will be lost. So please do this only when you know what you are doing. So I'm going to terminate this instance, and that's going to delete it. Okay. So you can see shutting down, and then it will be terminated. I have another instance which is just stopped because I have some work there. I don't want to lose that data. So that's EC2 for you. Okay. Now let's go to services, and or let's go to the home page here, and let's take a look at some other AWS services. Right. One is IAM. IAM stands for Identity and Access Management. Generally, this is the first service that you should learn. Identity and access management allows you to manage users who can connect to your AWS account and perform any action, right? And then you can define certain roles, which is a set of permissions, and assign those roles to the users. For example, if I go to the users, I see there is a user called Alice, which I have created here, right? Alice can log in to this account. I can also create another user. Let's say I have a teammate called Bob. I want Bob to be able to log into this account. So I say Bob, create a username called Bob and give them a password. So I can either auto generate a password or do a custom password, right? Then what permissions should Bob have? I have to assign policies. A policy is nothing but a set of permission, right? So I say attach policies directly. And let's say I want this user to be able to work with all EC2 features. So create EC2 servers, delete EC2 servers, and things like that. But I don't want them to manage anything outside of EC2. So I don't want them to work with S3 storage. I don't want them to work with Kubernetes services, right? So for them, I will give only access to EC2. I can also give administrative access, which will allow them to perform everything, right? But I don't want that. I want Bob to work with EC2. So let's type EC2 here. And here is a permission, which is Amazon EC2 full access, right? Okay, so let's give them the permission full access for EC2. Click on tags. I don't want to give any tags. Click on review. So I am creating a user called Bob with a password, automatically generated password. And when the Bob wants to log in, they have to reset the password and set up their own one, and they will have EC2 full access. Hmm? Create user. And now a user will be created, and this is a unique URL for the user to connect to the system, right? They can go to this URL and log in and set password. You can also send them an email with the instructions to log in, right? Now you are creating users which can perform certain actions on your AWS account based on what permissions you provide them. Okay, so this is how you can manage users. If you think you don't need some users, or some users have resigned or retired or whatever, you can delete those users also. So I'm going to go ahead and delete both of these users. You can create as many users as you want. You will not be charged any money for managing any users. And now you see users are deleted. Okay, so users are individuals who can access your AWS account. Groups are also there. So for example, there could be more than one user who want to perform development related activities, more than one user who want to perform administrative activities. So you don't want to assign individual permissions to them. You may create group of users and assign permissions to those groups, and then add or remove users. And whatever users will be added there, they will inherit the permissions from the group permissions. Permissions are policies, right? So you have a policy called, let's say, let's go back to the EC2 policy, EC2 full access. And you see EC2 full access. If I click on this plus mark, you can see a JSON output of what the policy will allow, right? So it will allow everything on EC2, it will allow everything on elastic load balancing, it will allow everything on auto scaling, on CloudWatch, everything will be allowed, right? If you just say read only access for EC2, then it will say allow EC2 describe. So on EC2 you can only run describe command, or you can only list down the instances, right? List down the elastic load balancers, list down the metrics, CloudWatch metrics, list down the auto scaling. That's all the things you can do. Yeah. So yeah, these are the policies. Okay. So IAM is very important. If you are going to manage a cloud account, you should know what is IAM and how it works. Okay. Um, the last one which I would like to take is S3, right? S3 is a simple storage solution. So SSS, and that's why it is called as S3. And S3 is a solution to store files. Okay, you can store files using S3, and then you can give the links of files to other users, your friends, your applications, and they can download the files and make use of those files, right? For example, if you let's say if you want to buy something on Amazon, right? And Amazon.com or Amazon.in, and then you, for example, let's say go to a product page and see that, hey, this TV is nice. Where are the information? Where is the data for the TV coming in? Where is the image for the TV coming in? Right? Where is the warranty information for the TV coming in? All that is stored as files in S3 most probably. And then the application, your Amazon.com or Amazon.in application, has information that, okay, for this particular product, the product image is available at this S3 bucket. So it will contact the S3 and download the file for you, right? So you can create buckets in S3. A bucket is nothing but a storage container, and you can put all your files in particular buckets. And then you can give permissions or restrictions on that bucket by um, yeah, by giving the permissions, by managing the permissions, right? For example, I can create a bucket, and let's call it as SkillUpRight, right? Now, in which location I want to create a bucket? Do I want to create a bucket in Mumbai or any other location? I say, well, Mumbai is fine, right? And then I say who will have ownership of the bucket. So you can define um, specific ownership, right? So you can define a specific user who owns this bucket, or you can say, well, I own the bucket because I'm creating it, so I can disable it, right? And then I can specify how I want this bucket to be visible to the public, which is internet users like you or others. So by default, it blocks all public access, but I can enable all public access, right? I can disable access for certain things and things like that, but by default everything is blocked for public, right? I can also enable versioning. So if there is a file uploaded in the bucket and then a new version of file is uploaded, do you want to maintain the versions? So generally you don't want to, unless you really want to keep the versions of the files. By default, it's disabled. You can give some tags. You can also encrypt. And when you create a bucket, you have this bucket, right? And now in this bucket, you can upload files. So you can upload a file, click on upload button, browse a file, and it'll be stored here. So if I go to, for example, documents, something is here. Or if I go to, let's say, D drive, training, DevOps, Terraform, I can have some index.html file. I just want to upload it, and I can upload. Right now, this index.html exists in my bucket. I can click on it, and it is going to show me the file. Right? I can click on open, and it also shows me the HTML file. Because I own this file, I can do whatever I want to do on this. Right? So this is what happens in S3. You can add multiple files, folders, anything is fine here. Okay. If you don't want a file, you can delete it also. You can delete the whole bucket as well. I can just say, well, choose it, and I can empty the bucket to drain all the files, or I can just say, well, delete it. This bucket is not empty, so first I need to empty the bucket. I need to type this text here to confirm this action because it is not reversible. Done. And now I can say delete, and I need to give the bucket name. Done. My bucket is done. So that's S3 for you. Okay. Also, I forgot to mention that any resources that you create using AWS are created in a AWS managed data center. Okay, and regions specifies where does AWS has their data centers, right? So if I maybe go here, and you can see here AWS has data centers at these places, right? So in US it has 4 data centers: North Virginia, Ohio, North California, and Oregon. In South Africa they have one in Hong Kong, Jakarta, Mumbai, Osaka, Seoul, Singapore, Sydney, Tokyo. So they have all data centers at all these places, right? If you create a server, it will be created in a particular data center. And depending on which data center you have chosen here, which is a region, so which region you have chosen here, your instances will be created there. Okay, so by default, I choose Mumbai because it's the closest for me. I expect the latency to be the least, and that's why I choose this location to create all my S3 buckets or EC2 instance and things like that. Okay, S3 buckets are global, so they are not limited to any data center. But yeah, EC2 and VPC, all these things. Okay, so regions are your data centers where your data or your configurations or your servers are stored. Okay, now I open for questions. We have 10 minutes for questions before we wrap it up. How many rules we can have in security group? There is no limit. You can have one rule for each port also, or one rule for each port and source IP address also. Where can we deploy the database in AWS? In which services we can? You can set up your own EC2 machine and set up database there, or you can also have a database service. For example, there is a RDS database service, and you can deploy a MySQL or PostgreSQL or SQL Server database. Any good references to learn AWS? You can go through AWS documentation. It's very exhaustive documentation. But yeah, I think SkillUpRight also has AWS courses. I'm not sure, but yeah, there are a lot of resources. Documentation is something I will start with. What is autoscaling and elastic service, and how does it work? Autoscaling means that if you set up a set of servers and you want to add more servers based on the load on the existing servers, that's called autoscaling. And elastic service, what do you mean by elastic service? Which is cost effective, database on EC2 or deploying RDS? Cost effective is having database on EC2. Yeah, you pay more for setting up RDS database. But if you set up your own EC2 instance, you can be more cost effective there. But again, if you set up RDS here, then you don't have to manage the database backup, the availability of the database, that will be taken care of by the AWS team. But if you set up your own database, then you have to take care of that. Okay. What is SNS? SNS is simple notification service. It is to send some notification to other services. What is PEM key? PM is a format of storing keys, right? So PEM, PPK are formats. That's all. Yeah, I am aware we have not covered Jenkins fully, and I was hoping that we will do it today. But since we are out of time now, we don't have enough time to finish Jenkins as well. So let's see if we can set up one more session for Jenkins. Okay. Difference between EC2 and Lambda function. EC2 is a server, Lambda is a function execution. So you can write your maybe Python functions and put it on AWS. And then when somebody hits that function, passes the parameters, you can give them the output. That's all. Can we connect to the buckets from outside using some APIs? Yes, for sure. You can. You can use this AWS command line interface to access all the AWS resources. What is S3 Glacier? S3 Glacier is a storage type when you want to store data as an archive, right? For legal requirements, for example, you may be required to store data of certain users or certain products for a long amount of time, maybe 10 years, 15 years, and you only want to extract them when you need to get them, like when customer demands it, or when for legal reasons you need to extract those. But you don't need to work with the file every day, right? So you don't want to pay for high IO file operations, so you store them in S3 Glacier. Apart from naming convention, is AWS different from Azure? More or less, no. So AWS, Azure, GKE, they may have different naming conventions, different pricing. For example, if you create a managed Kubernetes EKS cluster on AWS, you have to pay for the cluster, even if you don't add nodes. But on Azure, the cluster is free. You only have to pay for nodes. So pricing model is also different there. How can you share the file path or location of S3 bucket? If I enable public access for S3 bucket, then you will see a file path. You can share it with everyone. What is the method used if you want to keep our IP address of EC2 static? Then you can use elastic IPs so that the IP address does not change. Obviously, you have to pay for elastic IPs, but yeah, that is there. What is the scope of AWS for testing, guys? I mean, AWS is a platform. what you want to do, you can do. You can run your test cases on there. You can deploy your applications and run Selenium tests. I mean, yeah. Okay, so now we are done for today. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for interesting questions. I will meet you again sometime later. There is one question. Can we retrieve PM key if lost? No, you cannot retrieve the key. It is generated only once. You have to keep it safe. What does elastic stand for in AWS? Okay, elastic is a term which is adopted by AWS to emphasize that their services are flexible, right? They're always available, they're not going to break and all that stuff. Like I is used by Apple, iMac or iPhone or iPod, something like that, more of an advertising. Certificate, I'm not sure. SkillUpRight can tell you more about if you will get any certificate of for this session, but I don't think it will have any value if you just get a certificate for attending today's session. Can we use AWS and Azure both as per a project requirements? Yes, you can. You can use both for sure. Could you share the components available in AWS as diagram perspective? There are a lot of components. They may not always be related to each other. So I'm not sure what kind of diagram I can share, but AWS has a lot of documentation. Somewhere you can see some diagrams also if they want to show you the interconnectivity between various AWS components. Yeah, I do not have anything. Maybe in the white papers or case studies you can have. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you for your time today. I wish you all the best and see you again. Bye bye.